Good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin McMahill. I'm the Clark County Sheriff. Thank you for coming this afternoon. We have a very important update in a case that we've been working on for a period of time, and that is the case of the senseless murder of Andreas Probst, who his family actually calls by the name of Andy. And so I'm excited to announce that the second suspect in that case has been arrested and is going to be charged. This case has been played out in the media quite a bit, and there's a lot of very important facts that we're going to share with you today. So I'm going to turn this press conference over to Deputy Chief Nick Farisi, who's in charge of the Investigative Services Division, who will then be followed by Detective Lieutenant Jason Johansson, whose homicide team was able to bring this case to a close, then followed by the surviving daughter and mother of Andy, and then, of course, our esteemed District Attorney, Steve Wolfson. So, Nick, please.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good afternoon. I'm Deputy Chief Nick Farisi, and I oversee the Investigative Services Division that houses our homicide section. Like the Sheriff said, I'm here to talk to you today about a video most of you have seen by now, a cowardly act that in my 22 years of law enforcement left me personally appalled. Two juveniles joyriding in a car intentionally hitting and killing an innocent man who was riding a bicycle and leaving him for dead along the side of a road. While the first suspect, the driver of that car, was arrested on the day of this tragic incident on August 14th, our detectives have been working relentlessly to identify and arrest the second suspect, who was the passenger for the murder of Andreas Probst. Hours ago, we arrested that second suspect. Today, you will hear from Homicide Detective Lieutenant Jason Johansson, Probst's daughter, Taylor, who is here with her mother, Crystal. And as the Sheriff said, you will also have closing remarks from our District Attorney, Steve Wolfson, who will ultimately be prosecuting this case. After that, we will take a few questions. With that, I give you Lieutenant Jason Johansson.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here so we could detail what got us to this point in this investigation. I'll first explain some of the details of how we got to this point in the investigation, then we'll go over what that investigation has revealed. On the night of August 14th, when Mr. Probst was struck by the car, our fatal detail responded to that incident, took over that investigation, and began working it that evening or that morning as a fatal accident. Later on that morning, the driver of the vehicle that struck Mr. Probst was taken into custody, and he was booked into charges related to the hit and run investigation. Our fatal detail continued to work that investigation until on August 29th of this year, a school resource officer at a local high school was approached by a student who provided him a video related to the incident, which depicted, which we've all seen, a very appalling video, which lacks morality. It's a complete lack of conscience on any part of it. And the worst part about it in the video is you hear that everything was intentional. I think that's one of the hardest things for most of us to comprehend about that video. Within hours of that video coming to our attention, our fatal detail and my homicide detectives met, and my homicide team took over that investigation. Through the course of our investigation, we've worked relentlessly with countless hours, both canvassing the area, conducting witness interviews, locating surveillance video related to this incident, which has all led us to the point where we're at today, where I can tell you that we have been able to identify the second suspect. He was taken into custody earlier today by our CAT team, and ultimately we were able to serve a search warrant on his house and recover evidence related to this incident. Let me take you through a chronological breakdown of what our investigation has revealed from the morning of August 14th. So on August 14th at approximately 5:28 hours, what we learned is that there was another bicyclist, a 72-year-old male, who was riding northbound on Fort Apache near Washburn. That he himself was also struck by a car that we now know was driven by our same two defendants. However, the passenger that struck Mr. Probst was the driver of the vehicle at that point in time, and the other juvenile was the passenger in the vehicle. After they struck that male, they continued on further east on the other side of the 95, where they were spotted by another male driving recklessly in the area of Azure and Tenaya, just to the south. As that male was driving a white Corolla, began driving away from those suspects. The suspects then caught up to him in the vehicle at Azure and Tenaya, and they intentionally struck the white Corolla vehicle that was occupied by one male. Thankfully, he was uninjured. It was at that point in time that they continued northbound on Tenaya Road, where they saw Mr. Andres in the designated bike lane, just like the other male at Fort Apache and Washburn, where they then intentionally struck Mr. Probst, and they videoed the whole thing. And then that is when they fled into the area east of there. A short time later, the vehicle that we know was used in the striking of the white Corolla and Mr. Probst was recovered. And a short time later, we received a call of multiple stolen vehicles that were involved in an accident at James Bilbray and Balzar. As officers responded to that location, that is where they located one of the vehicles and later located the second vehicle involved in that accident in the area of Rancho and Craig. Officers believing that day that that vehicle was related to the accident involving Mr. Probst quickly surrounded that area, and thankfully they were able to get the first juvenile in custody, who was the driver of the vehicle when it struck Mr. Probst. The second passenger fled the area. During our canvass, we were able to get very good video of what he looked like fleeing the area. Although he was wearing a mask, he had numerous items of clothing and tattoos that we were able to see on video, that we were then able to match up to other videos with the same suspect. And as I said, from that point, we were able to use other investigative means to confirm and identify the second suspect. And we were able to serve a search warrant at his house and take him into custody. And during the service of the search warrant, we were able to locate clothing related to the clothing wore the day of the murder that you see the passenger is wearing. Right now, both suspects are juveniles. They are being booked into, one's already in juvenile hall. The other one will be booked into Clark County Juvenile Hall on charges of murder. We are in close coordination with the Clark County District Attorney, who will speak here shortly, and those charges will be amended appropriately, and it will be, both juveniles will go through this, hopefully the certification process to be considered adults for the prosecution phase of this. With that, right now, I'm not going to take additional questions till after the district attorney speaks. I'm going to turn over to final words to the family. I'll introduce the daughter, Lisa. Taylor Probst. I apologize.
Well, my name is Taylor. Bear with me, guys. This is not something we've ever really done before, but we are devastated by the senseless murder of Andy. Andy's life was robbed by two individuals who did not believe that lives of others matter. We believe that Andy's murder is a direct result of society's decayed family values and the strong effects that social media has on our youth. We as a family in no way feel that Andy's murder was based on race or profession. It was a random act of violence. We ask you to not politicize or use Andy's murder to fuel political agendas or to create cultural wars. Now, you are familiar with how Andy died, but let me tell you a little bit about how he lived. He was a man of honor and integrity. He spent 35 plus years in law enforcement and was a pillar in the community. He was a Little League dad, an honorary member of Girl Scouts, shout out to Troop 149, and he was always there for the various activities we'd get into as a family. His colleagues remember him as a real-life Pee Wee Herman. He was a jokester, a prankster, and always had a way to make you laugh. His death should be treated in the same way he lived, with honor and integrity. And maybe a dark joke here and there. Oops. Too soon is something that Andy would say. We want to thank Las Vegas Police Department, including Detective Shawson, Deputy Chief Farisi, the Victims Advocate Unit, Las Vegas Ghost Bikes, and most importantly, our community and our families and friends. You have provided us with the strength and support to get through this difficult time. We now ask that District Wolfson's office to take these crimes to the furthest extent of the law, as Andy's death should not be in vain. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Wolfson, the Clark County District Attorney. In any criminal case, there are two phases. Phase number one is the investigation, and I want to applaud Metro for the excellent work this last 5 weeks or so at conducting this investigation, which culminated in the arrest of this second individual. Investigations don't stop. The investigation will continue. But now we enter into phase two, which is the prosecution of these two individuals. And that has already started down at the juvenile level and very quickly will be transferred to the adult system. In the criminal justice system, if you are a minor and you are eligible to be charged with the crime of murder, you are automatically sent to the adult system. I am confident that that is what is going to happen in this case. I've been intimately involved with this case for the last few weeks. I've been briefed. I've seen the same video that all of you have seen. On a personal note, I'm a bicyclist myself. I took up this sport a few years ago. I'm addicted. I ride twice a week. And when I saw this video, it touched me in such a way that other bicyclists can appreciate. As your district attorney, it's my job to seek justice. I never met Andy. I've had the pleasure of meeting Andy's wife and daughter, and it is a pleasure to meet you. And we've discussed this case, and like I said in interviews yesterday, and I'll reiterate today, justice will be served in this case. I am taking a personal interest in this case. As many of you know, my office handles a lot of cases, and I can't get involved in all of them, but I do get involved in the most important cases, and this is one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, District Attorney Wilson. Before we take questions, I just want to thank the media for coming today and bringing awareness, and I want to thank the community for the awareness that they brought to this case over the last few weeks. I also want to thank the men and women of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, starting with our fatal detail and then ultimately with our homicide team that worked relentlessly these last several weeks to ultimately get these two people into custody and bring them to justice. I want to thank the Probst family for opening up your hearts and your home to the men and women of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department so that we can bring you the justice that you deserve, and applaud you for your courage to come here today and honor your husband and your father and the hero that he was. With that, we'll take a few questions just for law enforcement and the DA. Yes.
Did either of the teams express any type of remorse when they were taken into custody?
I'll let you answer that, Jess.
During interviews, as you know, with our laws in the state of Nevada, the parents can be present during juvenile interviews and whatnot. Both juveniles were able to be interviewed. They both invoked their rights.
Could you give us the age of the passenger?
Both are teenagers is what I'll give out right now. Thank you.
Yes, in the back.
Were police able to recover the cell phone that was used to take the video?
We have not been able to confirm that at this point in time. Like I said, we're still going through the evidence that we recovered from the residence when we took the suspect into custody today.
You mentioned these stolen vehicles. Where were these vehicles stolen? More specifically, where was the Hyundai stolen from before it ended up where it killed Mr. Probst?
We believe we have 4 stolen vehicles involved in this incident. Of the 4, 3 of those vehicles have been identified and have been recovered. All of those, one of the vehicles was stolen from the area in the northwest area where the incident occurred. 2 of the other ones we believe occurred in the area of like Vegas and Rainbow, Torrey Pines area. And those are the 2 vehicles that were involved in the accident I told you about at Bilbray and Balzar. And then the other vehicle, which we have yet to identify, which we are still trying to identify, is the vehicle involved in the first hit and run involving the bicyclist. I shouldn't even say hit and run, the first attempt murder that occurred of the bicyclist at Fort Apache in Washburn.
And that's the 72-year-old.
Correct.
And to clarify, who was the driver in that first attempted murder?
So
Was
the
it
passenger So the person who was arrested first for Mr. Probst, who was the driver of the vehicle that hit Mr. Probst, he was the passenger during the first incident that occurred at Washburn and on Washburn.
What was the condition of the other victims who were struck by the vehicle?
The both sustained non-life-threatening injuries. The bicyclist and then the driver of the other vehicle was non-life-threatening injuries also.
Non-life-threatening injuries to the bicyclist?
Both. To the person in the car, he really just sustained being shook up from the accident itself and the broken glass associated with being in a car accident. The person in the white Corolla who was struck just before Mr. Probst. The person who was struck on the bike sustained non-life-threatening injuries after being hit by the car.
Did the 72-year-old go to the hospital?
He got checked on scene, from my understanding.
What was the delay in tracking the passenger down?
So we got to remember what we're doing. You guys saw the same video I did. So we have a suspect who is wearing a mask. So it's not always going to be. We have to make sure in cases like this we are right. So for me, as a homicide section, my detectives, we have to remember our job is to be very fact oriented, and we have to sit there, as emotional as this video makes us. We have to take the emotion out of it and go, what facts do we have? And we have to follow those facts. And we have to make sure in a case such as this, or in any case, that we're right. That absolutely when it's time when we're actually going to arrest, we're right. And I've expressed this before on many of my other cases, that I'm going to make sure that that is what's done. And that's what happened in this case. We quickly began working our investigation, began deliberating. We received tips of who our suspect was that are wrong. And so we have to vet those, and we have to make sure that ultimately when that time comes for us to actually arrest somebody, that we're arresting the right person. And that was what the length of time that went into this case.
How did you find this team? Was it a tip that came in? Did you know where this team went to high school?
This tip came from numerous interviews and from digital evidence that we recovered as part of this investigation.
When you say interviews, are those interviews with the driver who's been charged in this case?
No. They are with multiple other people associated with the investigation.
Is there any evidence to point to perhaps they were on a substance at the time of the crash?
At this point, there's nothing to indicate that. So, right.
Can you clarify how you learned about the video? Was it a school, like a staff member that alerted?
A school resource officer was shown the video by a student, who then immediately, that school resource officer contacted Metro, and that's how we obtained the video. So,
Okay,
all right,
thank you.
thank
No
you
more
very much.
questions at this time.